my feel-good breakfast show.
Welcome to another episode of INGRAMS Skin Sessions. Very excited about this one. It's a series of thought-provoking discussions in a campaign that encourages brave conversations which are more than skin deep. We've proven how effective these can be, and today we're unpacking a brand new topic. This one's got me really interested: code switching. The way we adjust our style of speech, appearance, behavior, or maybe even expression within certain groups and environments. Show me you're a South African without showing me you're a South African.
What a familiar South African thing to do, right? So we know this, it's a fact. Many people find themselves presenting a different version of who they are to society. We can sound different when we are at work, for example, or with family and friends. We change our word pronunciations and even the tone of our voice in different situations. But do we truly understand when we code switch and why we do it? Here to unpack this topic further is political analyst, journalist, and broadcaster, a favorite of the show. It's Eusebius Makaza. Eusebius, so good to have you this morning.
Thank you for having me, guys. It's a pleasure to be here.
You're the perfect person for this because I would imagine
Why
you
are
get
you
to
calling
see
me a
this.
coconut?
Sorry, I should have changed my accent and my tone there. Sorry, I was in the wrong code. I laugh about this because it's one of those things, I would imagine, just as a normal South African, I see it happening 3 or 4 times a day where I'm like, oh my word, this is mortifying. You, I'm sure, see it play out on different levels of life with the position that you share kind of in media and where you see the world from. But maybe unpack it for us. What is code switching and why do we do it? What do you think prompts the action?
I think because we live in a diverse society, we've got different in and out groups, Graham. And when you are in a particular social setting or at work, there are different shades to you that you take into that particular dominant culture. So if you are at a Chisanyama, there may be a different subtext and culture to what might happen on the set of Expresso, for example. And so you code switch in terms of accent, language, cultural signifying in order to fit in order to belong, in order to make sure that, you know, you come across in a particular way. We do it all the time. And I think the versatility speaks to the diversity of society.
Yeah.
And of course, sometimes you can't control it, right? You may think that you are on your best Sunday behavior, and then suddenly Antarctica becomes something else.
Exactly, man.
Hey, why is everyone looking at me? I mean, what is this? But Eusebius, tell me, do you think that we do that because we feel that we need to adapt to certain environments, and as a result, that we're not showing up in our truest and most authentic sort of selves and nature?
I think that's a beautiful question. Firstly, I think we're all experts on this as South Africans.
Yeah.
But I think black South Africans in particular are. I think, Graham, you and I are probably a similar age. So when I went to
Thanks
high
for
school,
saying that, man.
we were black people in the 90s were the guinea pigs for multicultural education.
Yeah.
In the Eastern Cape, Graham College Boys High, where I went, excellent example. You arrive at a school in the 90s, the dominant institutional cultural ethos is obviously based on the historical people who went there, white boys, white fathers. And so suddenly a sandwich becomes a sami, sleeping becomes dos. You learn bits of lingo like, you know, dweeb, coord, all these kinds of things. And you do that because you want to be one of the boys. You want to be a Grahamian. And so you learn what I call, or I mean, I'm not the one to invent this term, the cultural grammar of the school.
Yeah.
So there's a cultural grammar in many different contexts. And as black South Africans in particular, we need to adapt to different settings. If you want to have a decent chance of, I don't know, for example, becoming a broadcaster, you probably don't want to sound like you come from the Cape Flats, not because that's a bad thing, to your authenticity question, but if we stereotype people, we index accent against intelligence, against excellence. Suddenly we go, oh my God, he sounds different. He's one of us.
You speak so well.
You speak
So well. The way that you're painting this picture, there are positives to it because we want to belong. We want to continue a culture. But in this country especially, and maybe in the world that seems more polarized now than ever before, that stereotype then feeds into a negative perception, or we use those idiosyncrasies to paint a negative picture. Have there been moments in your own life where you've caught yourself out?
I lived in England for a while. I was studying there as a student. And it was quite interesting to me how, as a South African, I felt like I needed to, and it wasn't even intentional, I think it just happened inadvertently. And then I looked back on it and realized that that's what had happened. And so suddenly I found myself when I am, let's say, the Oxford Union doing a debating competition, speaking in a different kind of way. How are you? You know, I mean, welcome to this evening's debate. My name is Eusebius McKaiser. But I suddenly thought to myself, I'm scared that the South African accent is not, and I'm doing it now, clear enough to be understood by the widest possible international audience. And so you can hear right now, I'm enunciating as clearly as possible in order to neutralize any difficulty with the South African accent being understood by someone from New Zealand, Canada, or the USA. So we even do it in that kind of context, and that's why you're right, Graham. It's not necessarily a bad thing.
Exactly,
To be understood is not a bad thing. The problem is when it becomes the dominant narrative. When I went to Graham, there were maybe 10% black boys in the school. Now there's about 90%. I will be appalled if I go back to the school
And
this
it's the
year,
same, yeah.
and it's exactly the same cultural grammar.
Have there been instances where you were very, very clearly and very specifically able to pull out the advantages versus the disadvantages of code switching in a specific moment?
The advantages are very simple. Moolah. It literally pays to be able to code switch.
Yeah.
So if you apply for a job at a multinational corporation, for example, and you can sound like the dominant managerial cultural grouping in that company, you're more likely to be hired.
Yeah.
A company I worked at, I shall not mention them, would sometimes fail to recruit excellent students, and when I asked the recruitment officer at the time, why didn't you pick Tabiso from UCT? I mean, after all, he's great at analytics. His marks are fantastic. He's one
His
of the top students."
enunciation is...
That would be too honest. They can't, there's one step before that, Graham.
Yeah.
You've heard this. No, you know what? He's just not. It's not a fit.
Not the right
It's not a fit.
Yeah.
It won't be a fit.
Yeah.
What they're really saying is that we can't take him to go and watch the Blue Bulls. He doesn't sound like Eusebius. Maybe he went to school in Mitchell's Plain rather than to Rondebosch. But they can't say that because that's obviously too honest. So it literally pays to be able to game. The authenticity question, part of me wants to say, there is the danger that you are becoming insincere and losing a part of who you are. And we never want to do that so far as possible.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I also think to myself, at what point must I stop worrying whether I'm truly being Eusebius and the different parts of me are just different shades of who I am?
That's
Exactly.
it. Because you can code switch and exist in different spaces and still be yourself in different ways, right?
Yeah, Cape Town Tambiso can't be the same as Hammanskraal.
Absolutely not.
Yeah, he carries a little piece of Hammanskraal with him wherever
Everywhere
he
I
goes. And when he goes back to Hammanskraal, he brings a marching band with him. So they know where
Drum
he's been.
majorettes.
I love this, and it does feel like this is a very personal journey because it does deal with socio-economic, it deals with your political ideology, it deals with your own identity. So all of this being said, to that person who's now had a light bulb moment and is going to be so embarrassed when they go back into work today because they've been operating on one side or the other, but that person who is struggling to find that authentic self in a space where they maybe don't fit the code, what advice do you have for them?
It's a very good question, sort of two things, and I'm sorry to bypass your question. The first person I want to address who's watching us right now is actually the ones who are the ambassadors of the corporate cultural grammar. You've got to ask yourself, am I enabling an environment in which Eusebius does not have to fear flattening his vowels when he is speaking?
Yeah.
Because if you're doing that, you're making a business mistake and not just an ethical mistake.
Yeah.
We know there's a link between diversity and maximizing company performance. So even if you don't care about ethics, it makes business sense to embrace cultural diversity in your company. If you are the person that you are talking about who's struggling with this, the first thing is don't feel bad. You are not responsible for your authenticity not being valued. Obviously, with unemployment being as high as it is, you've got to bite the bullet. You're not always going to get what you want. I'm not going to say leave your job.
Pick your battles, yeah.
Pick your battles very carefully and which hill you want to die on. But if you really are being squeezed at the point at which your dignity is trampled on, then the values of that company is simply not worth the psychological cost.
And it does happen every day. It happens every day where people really do hate themselves at the end of the
Absolutely.
workday. Eusebius, you are fantastic. This conversation, we could go on all day because there is so much and so many
Can we have a
layers
part 2 and a
it.
part 3?
I mean,
think we might
honestly,
need
we
this.
do need it. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's been beautiful. Drops mic. Okay, so listen, you can also join the brave conversation and then stand the chance to win some money while you're at it as well.
Nice.
$1,000 cash, all right, with the INGRAMS at Expresso's every week competition.
To win this week's cash prize, all you have to do is reply to the competition post on the Expresso Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram page and tell us about a time where you've had to code switch and why. Don't forget to include that hashtag, Your Skin, You're Brave. This week's competition closes at midnight on Sunday, the 31st of July. But you can find all the terms and conditions on expressoshow.com. This whole time, I've just been thinking you were just more worried about sounding like an Australian in the UK. I think that's generally the thing that gets me the most. But hopefully this has hit on a few points for you as well. We'd love to continue this conversation on our social media platforms. So please open up that conversation and keep it going. But Eusebius, you're a legend, brother. Thank you
Yes,
so
guys.
much.
Gem.
Nourish your skin with INGRAMS Moisture Plus, enriched with triple glycerine. For 48-hour intensive moisture. New look INGRAMS. Your skin, your brave.